No, it is not true. I'm saying unequivocally, it never happened. And it didn't. It never happened.
Now, Katie, how did you think overall that Mika handled this interview? What did she do right, and what things did she leave out?
Well, she did a great job if the goal was repeating Biden's talking points and setting him up to regurgitate his own talking points. She didn't do a good job if she was actually interested in representing the truth. She left out any and all corroborating evidence of Tara Reade's claims, which include, obviously, her brother, the friend she told at the time. Now we know that there was a friend that she told a few years later. The fact that she had said her mother called into the Larry King show, and the fact that that videotape was indeed found, or the fact that the New York Times itself found two interns who say that they remember her being abruptly stripped of certain duties, including supervising the interns, which lines up precisely with the timeline that Tara Reade had shared with me, with Ryan Grim, with others, being, she claims, retaliated against. She says that she was retaliated against and had duties removed all of a sudden.
So no, Joe, it's not going to go away that easily. Good try, though. Before this interview happened, BuzzFeed found out that talking points had been distributed amongst prominent Democrats. While Joe Biden has remained publicly silent about a sexual assault allegation made against him, his presidential campaign has sought to coordinate and unify Democratic messaging on the matter, advising surrogates earlier this month to say that the allegation did not happen. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. The Biden campaign circulated talking points among top Democratic supporters shortly after the New York Times published a story earlier this month about the allegation by Tara Reade, a former staff assistant in Biden's Senate office who says he assaulted her in 1993. With good news and bad, talking points are standard fare in presidential campaigns. In substance, the private guidance largely hews to the sole public statement on the matter from Biden's deputy campaign manager, Kate Bedingfield. We've talked about Kate in other episodes of this show, but the messaging shows that while Biden has stayed quiet on the allegations on the eve of his nomination, aides were taking the claims seriously enough behind the scenes to coordinate messaging among other Democrats to try to cast the matter as one that's been thoroughly vetted and determined to be unfounded. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. Biden believes that all women have the right to be heard and to have their claims thoroughly reviewed, the talking points read, according to a copy sent to two Democratic operatives. In this case, a thorough review by the New York Times has led to the truth. This incident did not happen. The New York Times had to rebut that. Sorry. We'll get to that in a moment. Here's the bottom line, they read. Vice President Joe Biden has spent over 40 years in public life, 36 years in the Senate, 7 Senate campaigns, 2 previous presidential runs. How did those go, Joe? 2 vice presidential campaigns, and 8 years in the White House. There has never been a complaint, allegation, hint, or rumor of any impropriety or inappropriate conduct like this regarding him ever.
To the point that it's been the butt of late-night television jokes for years now, like, say, this one.
You come into the building, get right in the middle. Hey, sister, you're beautiful.
Hi, Emily. How are you? Hope you have a big fence around the house.
Did you want to get Vice President?
Can I go with just alone?
Very good. Dad's gonna stand pretty close.
Let's get a picture.
I've been waiting for an excuse to play that one. But in essence, that is actually what Pelosi meant when she said Joe Biden is Joe Biden.
Democrats are in an increasingly precarious position as reporters assess Reade's allegation. By any measure of the Me Too movement that has seen the Democratic Party embrace "believe women" as a mantra, Reade, 56, has provided a serious account, disputed by Biden's campaign and former senior staffers who worked in his office in 1993, but corroborated in part by people she told about the incident in the 1990s. This week, after Reade said her late mother had called Larry King live about the incident, The Intercept published a transcript showing she called in to ask for advice about her daughter's negative experience with a prominent senator. And the actual clip has been found as well, and we've aired that on previous episodes of this show. And that corroborating evidence is what Mika didn't bring up in the MSNBC interview with Joe Biden. That interview happened yesterday morning. So my guess is that Alyssa Milano, because she's so well connected to the DNC machinery through her creative artists agency, Talent Executive Husband, I'm guessing that she was given a copy of these talking points as well. This article is entitled Rebuttal to Alyssa Milano, as she was quoted in a recent BuzzFeed article. In this BuzzFeed article, Alyssa Milano states that she was reassured by the fact that the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, an organization that was established as a response to Me Too movement to help support victims, would not fund a lawyer or PR representative for Reade. The group did provide Reade with a list of attorneys for her to contact. But according to Ryan Grim of The Intercept, the public relations firm that works on behalf of the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund is SKD Knickerbocker, whose managing director, Anita Dunn, is the top advisor to Biden's presidential campaign. A spokesperson for Biden declined to comment. The SKDK spokesperson assigned to Time's Up referred questions back to the National Women's Law Center, and Time's Up is an affiliate of the National Women's Law Center. As it turns out, Anita Dunn has some disturbing conflicts of interest. Here's a different BuzzFeed article entitled Former Obama Advisor Anita Dunn Helped Harvey Weinstein Strategize Before New York Times Story. Anita Dunn, a top Obama campaign staffer and former White House communications director, helped offer damage control advice for the Hollywood mogul. Dunn, for her part, is the managing director of SKD Knickerbocker, a Washington public affairs firm with deep ties to Democratic politics. She was communications director for Obama's 2008 campaign and served briefly in his administration. I want to remind you that Alyssa Milano was reassured that Time's Up didn't take Tara's case. But here's more on Anita Dunn from Law and Crime. At the center of the controversy and Reade's concerns is the crisis management firm SKD Knickerbocker, whose managing director, Anita Dunn, reportedly provided Weinstein with free strategy and damage control. Dunn is currently the decision-making authority behind Biden's campaign, according to the New York Times. SKD Knickerbocker oversees the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund's public relations efforts and assists with providing survivors access to other public relations outfits in their network. Dun dun dun. In an interview with Law and Crime, Reade said she felt specifically led on by the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund. She described a terminal search for lawyers whose names were provided to her by the group, but who declined to represent her for various reasons, including some lawyers who said they were fearful of Biden and others who outright said they were Biden supporters. Reade described an organization that in the end she believes manufactured an excuse not to fully support her. As more details have come to light, however, Reade's feelings about her fruitless work with the group have drastically shifted. Now she believes the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund effectively functioned as a catch-and-kill operation for Biden's 2020 presidential campaign. The following timeline, compiled by Law and Crime, which Alyssa must know about by now, perhaps we should ask her, makes it pretty difficult for Milano to take any reassurance from the fact that Time's Up Legal Defense Fund refused to help Reade. So the first thing that happened back in March of last year is former Nevada State Senator Lucy Flores accuses Biden of inappropriate touching. 7 additional women come forward. From June to December last year, the Biden campaign made payments totaling over $75,000 to SKD Knickerbocker. Then in January of this year, Reade approached Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, and then throughout January, the Biden campaign made payments totaling over $548,000 to SKD Knickerbocker. Then early in February, Dunn was elevated to decision-making authority in the Biden campaign, and throughout February, Reade says she continued the conversations and attorney searches with Time's Up Legal Defense Fund. Then in late February, the Biden campaign made one payment totaling over $257,000 to SKD Knickerbocker, and then in mid-March, Reade spoke with The Intercept's Ryan Grim, resulting in the story about Time's Up's decision not to proceed with the case. And then in late March, Reade learned about Dunn's work as SKD Knickerbocker's managing director and the relationship with Time's Up Legal Defense Fund via Ryan Grim's article. So Alyssa, how do you feel about all this? Why are we not talking about all of this? In an Amy Goodman interview, here are Tara Reade's on-camera words. One attorney said, "We've met as a firm and we have decided that there is no legal strategy to safely tell your story because it's Joe Biden." I'll link to this article which links to that interview if you want to hear it. I've already referenced this BuzzFeed article which references a list of talking points distributed to Biden campaign surrogates. The Biden campaign is advising surrogates to say Tara's story never happened. The Biden campaign talking points, which were first reported by BuzzFeed News, instruct supporters to describe the candidate as a fierce advocate for women who has never faced any complaint, allegation, hint, or rumor of any impropriety or inappropriate conduct. The talking points also inaccurately suggested that an investigation by the New York Times this month found that the incident did not happen. Biden's campaign talking points say the Times story served as proof that Reade's allegations did not happen, but the story did not conclude this, nor did it conclude that an assault definitively did happen. The Times reported that 3 former Senate aides, all of whom Reade said she complained to at the time, either did not remember the incident or said that it did not happen. The Times also spoke to former interns who said they did remember Reade suddenly ceasing to oversee them, aligning with Reade's claim that she was pulled from that duty. Last year, when other women came forward to say Biden touched them in a way that was uncomfortable, Reade told The Union, a California newspaper, that while she worked for Biden, the then senator touched her neck and shoulders. She also told the paper that Biden wanted her to serve drinks at one of his events because he liked her legs. When she refused, she said her responsibilities were reduced. Business Insider reporter Rich McHugh, an investigative journalist who served as a producer on Ronan Farrow's Harvey Weinstein reporting at NBC News, has identified more people who have corroborated elements of Reade's claim. Those people include a former neighbor of Reade's who said they discussed the assault allegations at the time, and a former colleague who said Reade had told her about more general harassment. In an interview with BuzzFeed News on Tuesday, Reade said she would like to know what Biden and his campaign think about the reporting of Rich McHugh, who was formerly reporting on the Weinstein case and is a well-renowned investigative reporter. What is their comment on the Business Insider articles that did a deep dive investigation into what I've asserted that resulted in multiple corroborations on the record of what I experienced of sexual harassment and sexual assault by Joe Biden? On the Hill Rising, they're guessing that Mika's failure to bring up this evidence is probably the last word from MSNBC that we'll ever hear about it. Another point that didn't come up was the fact that the Biden campaign called the New York Times and got them to change a sentence in their story. So maybe Crystal Ball is right that we're not stuck with Joe Biden after all.
So, I have some advice for our friends at the Democratic Party. You don't have to do this. You really don't. Joe has not actually clinched the nomination. He has not actually won a majority of the delegates. What's more, the aligned forces of the Democratic establishment gave Joe the nomination, so they can certainly take it back. There is still time, given the evidence that has newly been revealed, to make a different choice. And let's be honest, Democrats, reporters are only now getting serious about digging into this thing to find additional evidence and potentially additional accusers. It was just Wednesday of this week that the Washington Post called for Biden to release his personnel records. Ronan Farrow is now reportedly investigating the allegation after the Biden team overreached in trying to pin their defense on a bogus assertion that the New York Times had cleared them. Legacy Media is now invested in adding something additional to the story so that they can credibly claim to have approach this with vigor. Do you really want to bet that there's nothing else out there, that there's no other shoe to drop? And putting all of this aside, Dems, do you really feel amazing about how the Biden campaign is going right now? I mean, the lackluster fundraising, the meandering answers, the complete absence of leadership. You sure this is the guy you want to bet the farm on? Because as much as Bernie Sanders was a threat to the Democratic establishment, another loss to Donald Trump could also be a threat to the Democratic establishment. How much legitimacy are all of these people and their media allies going to maintain when the guy they promised us was the one who could win fails to deliver on literally the only thing that Dem primary voters cared about when they went to the polls? I mean, look, I'm sure they'll do their best with Russia or Comey or electoral college excuses or whatever. But might the voters begin to ask some hard questions about why the very folks you keep telling us we have to suck it up and settle for because they are so darn electable keep failing to get elected? I don't know that voters will open their eyes, but they might. And that is something that should send shivers down the spine of every operative in this town.
And the reason they're going to have shivers in their spines is because we're all going to know, it's going to be blatantly obvious to all of us that they would rather have Donald Trump than Bernie Sanders. Now that's a total duh for the Bernie or busters, but it's not a total duh for a lot of comfy suburbanites, and they're going to have to face this squarely. The DNC has never had any real intention of defeating Donald Trump. They only care about defeating Bernie. This is what Jen Resch has to say. I'll let her have the last word. As evidence supporting Tara Reade mounts, Joe Biden must step down. To not demand this is to write Me Too's obituary, and probably the obituary of the DNC as well. Tara Reade first told her story of how Joe Biden had raped her in an interview with journalist Katie Halper more than a month ago. It took 19 more days for the New York Times to publish an investigative report of Reade's claim. For a couple of weeks in April, it seemed like this story, like the inconvenient woman at the heart of it, might neatly disappear. In recent days, however, further evidence supporting Reade's claim has emerged. There is far more to say about this story and its competing claims, but there are three conclusions we must face. Number one, this story is not going away no matter how much the Biden campaign might want it to. Number two, Reade has a credible claim that deserves thorough investigation and reporting. Number three, it is impossible for such a fair hearing to take place so long as Biden is the presumptive nominee. This is why Biden must step down immediately. I would like to believe that almost 3 years after Me Too, we have a better understanding of the dynamics of sexual assault. I would like to believe we know how trauma impacts how survivors tell their stories, often disclosing information in stages. I would like to think we can see how powerful men are protected within hierarchies and how the immense costs of speaking up keep women from coming forward for years. I would like to believe we have learned that when women come forward, we should listen with a predisposition to believe rather than to doubt. But the response to Tara Reade says otherwise. If you follow mainstream coverage, you might easily miss the accumulation of evidence supporting Reade's claim, buried as the facts are in pieces filled with doubt, insinuations, and outright smears. Thanks, Amanda Marcotte. The Biden campaign has gone so far as to release talking points that it is asking prominent women to use to defend Biden, claiming that a thorough review by the New York Times has led to the truth this incident did not happen. The New York Times reporter who investigated the story had the unwelcome task of refuting the Biden campaign's claim, clarifying that it didn't find the accusation to be false and made no conclusion either way. In fact, the article contained examples of significant corroborating evidence for Tara Reade. It reported that a friend of Reade's confirmed that she had told them the details of her sexual assault at the time it happened. They further spoke to her brother and another friend who both said that she told them of a traumatic sexual incident involving Biden. Now Business Insider has revealed two more corroborating accounts, both on the record. A neighbor reported that Reade had shared the details of her assault at the time, while a co-worker who worked with her in the mid-1990s said Reade told her how she had been harassed by Biden. Reade has also insisted that she had shared the details with her now deceased mother, who was distraught and encouraged her to go to the press or police. She mentioned that her mother had even called into Larry King's radio show to ask for advice, a claim that is now strongly supported by a recording from August 1993. Reade claimed that she complained directly to her supervisors about harassment and then, after being dismissed by them, filed a complaint with the Senate Personnel Office. She says that after that, she was then removed from her responsibility of supervising interns and told that she had to find another job. There are no existing records, but Reade believes her complaint was sent to Biden, in which case it may be in his papers at the University of Delaware. However, those papers remain sealed and Biden has not been asked, nor has he offered to release them. It is established that Reade worked in Biden's office and that her employment was abruptly ended. The New York Times spoke with the interns who confirmed that she stopped supervising them suddenly and without explanation. The New York Times also spoke to both supervisors and co-workers who worked with Reid at the time who deny any complaint of harassment. None of the supervisors offered an alternative to Reid's explanation for her departure. It is not clear if they were even asked. However, there are several quotes testifying to Biden's character as a family man and surprised that he could be accused of assault. One co-worker who claims to not even remember Reid is quoted claiming, "When you work on the Hill, everyone knows who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, and Biden was a good guy." But as Christina Cauterucci points out, this is hardly reassuring evidence. She can't remember a colleague who verifiably worked with her in 1993, yet she wants her inability to remember any sexual misconduct allegations from that time to be taken as an affirmative defense of Biden and affirmative proof that it couldn't have happened. At this point, Biden's affirmative defense rests on witnesses to his character as a family man, his support of pro-woman measures like the Violence Against Women Act, and the willingness of others, particularly women, to speak up for him. These women are being asked to drink a poison chalice because they'll have to defend Biden even though it makes them look really bad when it comes to the Me Too movement. The stuff of feminist nightmares is blowing up in the presidential race, Rebecca Traister shrieks at the cut. Joe Biden's shaky past behavior around women and their bodies isn't staying in his past, despite his promise to pick a woman vice president and appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court. Tara Reid's charge that Biden sexually assaulted her got strong pieces of corroboration over the weekend and should surely imperil Biden's position at the top of the ticket, but likely won't. So whichever woman gets the nod to be his running mate will wind up drinking from a poisoned chalice. Democratic women will have their own history of righteous advocacy held up against them, used to make them look like hypocrites for backing a man who has been credibly accused of behavior they have aggressively condemned. And if he loses, feminists will be blamed for encouraging an environment in which claims of sexual harm are taken seriously enough to damage a politician. And now that there is more evidence lending credibility and weight to Reid's claims, feminists and advocates for survivors are being put in a terrible position. We are told that we must stay silent and accept this because the need to defeat Trump is paramount. Women who have been fierce advocates for Me Too and for survivors are tying themselves in knots, trying to figure out how to justify support for Biden while not becoming implicated in covering for his actions. And you're not going to be able to have it both ways. You're just not. But the brutal, unvarnished truth is that this is an impossible task. There is no way to salvage Me Too and publicly support Biden. Already, we have been subjected to the painful spectacle of prominent feminists like Michelle Goldberg, Amanda Marcotte, and Joan Walsh using the standard sexist playbook to undermine Reid's credibility by painting her as emotionally unstable and questioning her motives. Other feminists like Jessica Valenti and Rebecca Traister have taken principled stands rejecting the attempt to discredit or sweep Reid's allegations under the rug. They are rightly terrified of the damage this will do to Me Too and see it as a trap, but it is a trap that we do not need to fall into. We don't have to do this, folks. Me Too exposed how powerful men are protected by a vast network of enablers because they are deemed too important to fall. It is obvious why people desperate to defeat Trump would consider Biden too important to fall, even though he's going to lose. But it is indefensible that we are being asked to be his enablers. This is not a choice that we should have to make. That burden should not fall on the shoulder of survivors. This is not about whatever personal choice a person makes when they go to the voting booth in November. This is about the public statements, demands, and actions that we can take now and that shape the range of choices available. I will say it again, Biden should step down. And if he won't do so willingly, and I do not believe he will, it is up to us to demand that he do so. Expressions of grief, anger, and bewilderment that we have been put in this position are understandable, but they also have the effect of conceding that Biden's ascendancy and the narrowing down of our choices to him versus Trump is inevitable. It is not. The elections are 6 months away. This is a long time in normal times, but a lifetime in the age of pandemic. The only thing holding Biden up right now is the power of a unified Democratic leadership and our own fear and helplessness. But we should not feel helpless. When the Harvey Weinstein story broke in the fall of 2017, I could not have predicted that hundreds of powerful men would lose their jobs. But a tidal wave of anger, long held in check, burst the dam, and that is precisely what happened. Heads of publishing empires, network news hosts, famous actors and comedians, sitting senators, heads of corporate boards, the rich and powerful were all forced out of their positions and exposed. It is worth remembering not how quickly they fell, but how long they had maintained their power. The experience of harassment and assault were not new, and they were hardly a surprise to the women whose lives have been shaped by that experience. What was new was that we were all speaking up at once, and that the world was listening. We began to insist that these experiences were not simply humiliations to be endured, but injustices to be confronted. Now we are witnessing nothing less than the turning back of that clock. Once again, the full weight of powerful men and the threats they wield is bearing down on us. We are being asked to remain silent. But if Me Too should have taught us anything, it is that we do not have to. Contrary to what they'd have us believe, no is an option. If all of the feminists and progressives who are now wringing their hands at the awful, terrible thing we are being asked to do instead raised our voices to demand Biden drop out, I believe we could change the calculus. He could be forced to step down, and the Democratic Party would have to come up with an alternative means to select a nominee. But what about Trump? I hear you asking. That is indeed the threat being held over our heads, that if we choose to stand with survivors, we risk another Trump administration and all that would mean. If we speak up, we are told that we are choosing our own single issue over all the people who would suffer. This ignores the fact that survivors do not exist in a vacuum. The cost of sexual harassment and violence is not only the emotional trauma, though that matters. The costs include jobs that are lost due to harassment. Survivors of domestic violence risk poverty and homelessness if they leave, and often see their children taken by the state if they stay or they leave. Others are criminalized when they fight back, and some choose to stay because to leave is to risk deportation. Survivors have pregnancies that cannot be terminated because abortion rights are under attack. The tyranny of managers over working hours and conditions makes sexual harassment a fact of life for millions of women, and the poverty so many women experience as a knock-on effect of abuse, harassment, and diminished opportunities leaves them dependent on the fragile safety net that is being torn apart. We do not and never have lived single-issue lives. The stakes of taking this violence seriously is not about a single issue or even one woman, no matter how much she deserves to be heard. It is Biden, not us, who is willing to put his own path to power over the lives of millions of people. I have heard people say that demanding he step down risks chaos. I'm not sure if anyone noticed, but we are already in chaos. It is not at all clear how elections will even be held in November and who will be able to vote. If the leaders of the Democratic Party, at a time when Trump's numbers are going into freefall, cannot figure how to replace a potential rapist at the top of their ticket, then the problems are only likely to deepen. I cannot tell you with any certainty what will happen if Biden steps down. I do believe that the Democratic Party, for all its seeming ineptitude, is capable of replacing him if he does. But the thing I know deep in my bones is that to stay silent now is to bury Me Too. The courage of all the survivors who have come forward, the progress we've begun to make in shifting the terrain on which women live their lives, and the lessons we learned will not survive this moment. We must speak in the face of power and fear as we have done before, and we must demand Joe Biden must step down.